Ladies and gentlemen, this is internet personality Vangelus, and Bold Form's very first release is on my table. This is coming through here on loan from Madhouse Toys. Lonewolf is, apparently, still going to be the first of 5 Stunticon-alikes that they're working on, but the company very smartly tweaked him to work with the Combiner Wars Stunticons to maximize his functionality with what's popular right now. This guy's vehicle mode is modeled intensely after the original G1 Motormaster toy, and hey, elephant in the room, you, get over here. Alright. There's no gray panel on the front of the trailer box, and there are 2 big blatant folded up legs there instead. It's less distracting than you might think, but for Lonewolf's cost, it's a pretty indefensible aesthetic oversight. The trailer overall is the weak side of this mode. It tries to be the ripple pinstripe gray box that G1 hardcores want it to be, but the sheer number of uneven breaks and hinges even managed to prevent a simple purple stripe from existing without interruption. On the bright side, the cab is a really lovely and crisp sculpt with very sharp paint apps and an almost satin-like matte finish to the black plastic parts that finally gives me a first taste of this piece having some kind of high-end quality. Just don't push down on the spot where it links to the trailer. Unless this is legitimately entertaining for you to do, I don't know. G1 Motormaster was always pretty hugely out of scale with the 4 Stunticons, and Lonewolf brings that quality back as his truck cab looks positively tiny alongside the Combiner Wars Deluxes. It does look kinda in scale when you sidle Blackjack up next to him though. Comparing Lonewolf to Combiner Wars Motormaster is an exercise in futility, as they have so little in common it's about as effective as figuring out if you prefer apples over machine guns as a thing to upload into your smartphone. While Lonewolf has got dedicated sword storage underneath his alt mode and the back of his trailer does open to reveal some space, he's got too much stuff to cram in there. I don't know if there's like a secret way to get everything loaded up, but you're not getting an all-encompassing solution in lieu of just leaving some things in his box or on the side of the table. Transformation begins with an obvious piece of parts removal and a not quite so obvious piece of parts removal. Yeah, that much of the trailer is set off to the side. I guess it makes for a neat tray to fill with other spare parts. The rest of the conversion is best described as a lot of good ideas that all start to happen but not quite finish. Like, there are a whole lot of accordion folding panels that compress together against blocks of robot mass, only they don't tab in, they just rely on the friction of their hinges to keep them from waggling around. Those hinges are not entirely reliable. Also, the cab uses a fairly cool sliding track design to suck into the robot's shins and form the feet. Only there's not a solid locking point anywhere along either track, just a spot at which the sliding has to stop. I really dig how the torso comes together, both for all of its mass reshaping panel motions, and the fact that many of those panels have actual tab slot connections to keep them in place. It's a whole bunch of neat and cool ideas that needed another couple of passes to fully ripen, but instead are just presented as is. You might be hearing a phrase like that again over the course of this video. Lonewolf's robot mode is based enormously on that of the G1 Motormaster toy, building it out with more of an actual physique and regular robot man silhouette. I think this looks awesome. Lonewolf's got great proportions with his powerful shoulders and big basketball player legs. His midriff is chiseled out by creating some hip skirt armor that is probably the wonkiest looking part of this mode. Aside from those 2 strands of trailer panel banana peel, bipedal Lonewolf is what first got me so interested in this piece back at TFCon Chicago 2014. Take a look at that glorious giant head box. The face sculpt is totally the G1 toy and I really dig it. Also, now that more of it is visible, I've got to give some more kudos to the paintwork and black plastic finish. It's all really clean and bright, and that matte finish on the darker pieces is gorgeous to look at. Lonewolf's got one weapon, a very on-topic Menace Sword that's got a silver blade and a whole lot of curvature. It plugs into his mitts quite securely. Speaking of mitts, you can switch out his fist-hole hands for a pair of fused fingers knuckle-jointed hands. They've got a peg-hole channel carved into the palm, but it is terrible at holding the sword handle. They also don't look amazing when they're open. I don't know, I guess options are good. As for all the other pieces, I have no idea, man. The trailer chunk opens up to reveal sculpted detail, and, like, that's about it. The combiner parts don't seem to do anything meaningful for Lonewolf's solo robot mode. I'm big on spare parts integration, and Lonewolf is barely even trying, but I dig that there are a lot of folks who are fine to have some spare stuff on the side with a combiner play pattern. So maybe this is just me. So, that gray piece that helped store the sword in vehicle mode. pull the gas tanks off of Lonewolf's feet, and they can combine with it to form a little gun. Its handle is sized for G1 Scramble City limb robots. It's like, I get it, Easter eggs are cool. This is kinda cool, I guess? Lonewolf's big box head is a very simple swivel joint left and right, and back here, it'll bang into these tabs up here if you go past turning his head about that far. Now on the bright side, I don't think you really need to turn his head farther than that to look, you know, dynamic and stuff, but be aware of that. If you want to open these flaps up, for some reason, just to allow him to spin his head around, that's your prerogative, and I won't judge you loudly. His shoulders, as they are right now, are completely unposable. So what you gotta do is, see there's a gray sliver here, that's gotta be out past these two things to then allow his shoulder to go forward and backwards. Simple friction joint. For outward movement, you gotta move it out a bit to get one click, move it out a bit farther to get the other click. I like the idea behind this, because it means like you can have this much outward posability, but then have a nice, slim, blocky profile of, like, you know, squares next to squares. It's a cool idea. Also, often, that pectoral plate likes to pop up. I don't know if that's a global problem, but it happens constantly with this copy of the toy. His elbows are double jointed, and that means they can bend all the way up like that. Pretty good curl. The top joint has some detenting, bottom joint does not. His wrists, since they peg off, they are a swivel, and these are the Poseable Hands. And here's the range you get out of these Poseable Hands. There's a single joint, the four fingers are fused, and that's how far it opens. I guess I kind of see the point, but I don't know. Also, as I mentioned earlier, there's a 5mm peg capable channel cut into the palm. Problem is, it only goes halfway down the palm, then there's nothing. That means that if you have like a long peg that has like, you know, any kind of weird stuff with it, the thickest part has to be up here. If it goes past that, things get a bit wonky. His waist is a big old simple swivel. Really tight. Bam, bam. These skirt things are real good at getting out of the way. If you want to fold them up and give him like a square, you know, fully rectangular torso, be my guest. I prefer things down here. I like the look of this, you know, cut abdomen. His legs have got hips, like most people's do. And here's the sound of them going forward. Pretty tight. Here's the sound of him going outward. It's all squeaky. Never pleasant to listen to, but it does not necessarily mean bad things are happening, as we've learned over the years. The one bummer is, it's really easy to move his leg out, and then when you want to move it back down, that joint moves, and everything gets all messed up. That joint doesn't really lock in up there. It's like, you gotta be aware of where your pressures are going. There's also a thigh swivel. There's a double-jointed knee. Some copies of this toy, I've seen reports, had pretty loose knees. As far as I've seen, tightening all the screws tends to fix all that. So just see how yours is and then tighten the screws and see if that fixes it. The double jointing means he's got, you know, a fairly sick amount of bend to his knee. And he has, you know, a nice equal length of, you know, above the knee and below the knee. So the bend really accomplishes something. I kind of like that. One bummer I've had with this one is that he's got this sliding thing for the combine mode, and it doesn't really lock in anywhere. It just relies on friction. And sometimes one of these things compresses and the other doesn't, and I'm like, what happened to you? And then I realize I just have to do that. Finally, for ankles, he does not have like a full foot ankle tilt, but he's got that thing where the front of the foot can tilt. And on this guy, he's got like this enormous platform for the bottom of his feet. This works real well for an ankle tilt. Like, it keeps him looking solid and flat on the ground no matter how wide his legs go. So his posability's fine. I would have preferred some more, you know, clean-sounding detents over joints. There's a big problem, though, which you might have seen here and there. We'll go to the less problematic part first. Sometimes, like, these things don't actually lock in, so sometimes they do that. These things are relying on the friction of this hinge to keep this part down, and gravity. Kind of works with gravity, but given how ridged this stuff is and how broken up the look of the trailer box already was, and the fact that this stuff tabs in back here, I would have liked to see a tab there. Much worse are these parts, which, you know, fold out like this, and then accordion together like this. These are also relying on the friction of the joints to hold together. On this side, it kind of works. You know, doesn't come loose. On this side, this part starts flapping constantly. Just when I'm posing him, this part starts flapping. Again, I am astounded that there are no tabs to actually finish locking together what is otherwise a pretty good transformation step. Up here on his head, similar thing happens when you try working his neck joint. The box around his head, it tabs together, but it's got a lot of wiggle. And on the back, there's like pieces layered into pieces, and it just doesn't feel like, look, it doesn't feel super secure. These panels here tab in so well, I don't understand why such technology did not take place on all the other collapsed panels on this guy's body. So, that's a little bit of a spoiler alert. That's kind of the story of Lonewolf, in a nutshell, is like all these really cool ideas, but then there are all these, like, to me, somewhat basic finishing techniques that are not here, that instead feel like, no, the joints are tight enough, they'll hold it in place. A pin hinge will never be reliable enough for that, without, like, massive detents involved, and there aren't any. But this isn't this guy's entire story, so let's continue on. Lonewolf's really tall, clocking in at 9 inches of height and looking all gigantic next to his potential Combiner Wars compadres. This probably suits some of your tastes, but the real question is that of combination. So let's do this! A good chunk of this process is getting Lonewolf into a state where his top half is in vehicle mode and his bottom half is in robot mode. I guess I could have just skipped ahead, but, well, okay, I guess I could have just skipped ahead. Oh well, it's too late now! The Lonewolf's back becomes the Menace Sword's chest, starting off with a friggin' cool rotating ab panel. The rest is, admittedly, a bunch of separate stuff stuck onto the pecs and crotch, but that secret flip-out stomach detailing helps a lot. The truck cab chunks slide and fold around to sit on the back of Menace Sword's thighs. Now, check this out. See how one looks flatter and more compressed than the other? This is via a series of folds and flips that feel kinda like half of a truck cab panicking to try and squeeze into a tighter shape. Like, there's a double barbell ball joint involved even. The end result is fine, but there's one huge problem. The entire compressed mass doesn't fasten onto the leg! It relies on the enormously tenuous friction of the slider and hinge assembly to hold it up against the pull of gravity, maybe asking the Menace Sword's butt to grip down when possible too. I can't believe that the final touch of locking in was left out here. Anyway, Lonewolf gets Combiner Wars compatible via a foursome of hollow blocks that plug into his shoulder and knee ports. These things are sized for a snug fit with the Combiner Wars connector, even featuring a tab to clip them into place. The problem is that the tab just flexes. It has no spring release, so getting the limb bots out of here requires some carefully applied pressure with a solid thin tool of some kind through the slit on the back of the connection. The combined form of Lonewolf and the Stunticons is a pretty menacing Menace Sword. The torso's got a real nice shape. There are little boxes on either side of the head, all G1 proper. I think this makes for a great silhouette and looks really sharp, except, well, okay, I need to be rid of these dumb floppy truck chunks. The small silver lining to these is that it is trivial to unseat them from their slider track connections and just set them aside. I think it really sucks to deal with unfinished engineering by just pulling the offending pieces off, but overall this improves the look and feel of the combined form, whatever the cost. So where was I? Right, the torso looks really sharp, showcasing all that stuff I've been saying about bold forms delivering a delightful mix of crisp paint apps and satiny plastic finishes. The head has got some Glasgow smile stuff going on, but in a way that works with the look in my opinion. Lonewolf's solo face is on the back of this head, but is so entrenched in layered stuff that you'd have to be trying to catch sight of it here. That head's also on a ball joint, though it hardly gets much motion outside of swiveling from side to side. The Combiner Wars limbs make for shoulders and elbows and etc., as they do. There's also still a big, beautiful waist swivel, letting the Menace Sword swing his upper body for big super robot clobbering times. The hips are still Lonewolf's hips, and they work alright. The new skirt armor plates do a good job of swiveling out of the way, too. Thing is, Lonewolf's knees are supposed to be sucked into the thigh blocks, but they also kinda aren't, despite my best efforts, and sometimes they start bending instead of the joints you want to be bending. But with some careful balancing, you can get this dude into a pose or two that'll hold solid for the most part. Now, I know an easy place to put the blame for instability is on the Combiner Wars hand-foot gun. It doesn't have ankle tilts when it's a foot and all that. So let's swap in Perfect Effects gun hands and Gatling feet. This looks pretty cool, and the ankle tilts help a bunch to be sure, but there remains a proclivity for this guy to topple backwards, mostly driven by those not quite lockable solo mode knees, which then cause a topple Doppler effect that drags back pretty hard on the Combiner Wars connector ratchets in the knees. Also, by the by, the perfect effect palm slots are pretty terrible at holding onto Lonewolf's sword too. I think it's because the sword handle has a slot cut through it for some reason I've not actually identified, so if it's going into a hole that's not like fully enclosing, it loses some friction. Big question, is this combiner mode the money shot it needed to be? Kinda? It looks great, it holds together alright, and can take on a few display poses depending on what kind of feat you have installed. That toppleback syndrome could probably be solved with a lot of screw tightening or figuring out how the hell you get the solo mode's knees to stop bending. It's overall a pretty decent combiner deal if you can deal with tossing the truck cab aside or living with those things flopping down all the time. This release has got excellent paintwork, very cool finishes on the plastic, and some very, very cool engineering ideas. The big, huge, gigantic ball chained to its ankle is that many very basic design concepts are simply not present here, the worst offender being the number of times an assembly hopes that its movement joints will have enough friction to hold it in place. The accordioned panels flapping around is annoying, and the lack of a front panel on the trailer in the vehicle mode is bewildering, but the entire truck chunks on the back of the combined mode's thighs just flopping around and transforming a bunch and then continuing to flop around without any final lock-in mechanism, that is probably the lowest point of the Lone Wolf experience. A lack of polish that I just cannot pardon. And it really sucks to be saying this stuff because the qualities that are there are really high marks for a company's debut release. Lone Wolf feels like a bunch of good ideas that mostly remained in bullet point form even as the figure went to mass production. This guy needed a few more design passes to say the least, and I'm just astounded that a promising piece like this appears to have had its development time cut off well before it was ripened. I think Bold Form's upcoming Triple Changer Megatron looks incredibly fun and cool, and I think they've nailed an awesome and near satin-like look on their finished plastic components, but guys, simple folding stuff has got to lock into place. Hinges can't do all that work alone. Lone Wolf is a learning experience to take plenty of critical lessons from, and I hope Gladius comes out with 3 times more polish than this tenuous truck transformer. Lone Wolf is a very respectable first effort, but he cannot be treated as the par for finished quality. Anyway, this has been Internet Personality Vangelus, and I hope Bold Form's Gladius is their personal Night Morpher Annihilator. A nice looking Megatron that turns into a gun and a tank is a concept I want to get behind. Let me get behind your robot man!